everyone, Piscean here. In this video I want to go over disaster events, midpoints, and hypothetical planets, a AI enhanced deep dive case analysis, because this was generated with the help of Perplexity AI agent. And before we get started, please like, subscribe, comment, share if you dare and care, and continue to learn astrology for free through this channel. So this is a retrospective symbolic analysis of 5 major disasters using the midpoint technique, cosmobiology, the 90-degree dial, and the 8 Uranian trans-Neptunian planets in the Hamburg School. We see planetary positions are computed with the Swiss ephemeris for each event's precise timestamp and coordinates. In this video, we're going to look at September 11th attacks, terrorism mass casualty, Space Shuttle Challenger technological explosion, Chernobyl nuclear disaster, nuclear radiation.
Hello, Moto.
Sorry guys, my ringer is on. Should not even be on. So, next is RMS Titanic sinking 1912. I'm going to go over that. Maritime collision. And Fukushima Daiichi disaster 2011. Nuclear earthquake tsunami. So, this is a retrospective symbolic analysis, not a causal or scientific study. Astrological configurations are interpreted as symbolic reflections, not predictors. Planetary positions computed with the Swiss ephemeris. And now, scope and method. This presents a retrospective symbolic analysis of 5 major disasters, examined through 3 advanced astrological lenses, which we talked about: the midpoint technique of cosmobiology, 90-degree dial of the Hamburg School, and 8 Uranian trans-Neptunian planets, which are Cupido, Hades, Zeus, Kronos, Apollon, Admetos, Vulcanus, and Poseidon. Introduced by Alfred White and Friedrich Segren. So, all planetary positions are computed with the Swiss ephemeris for each event's precise timestamp and geographic coordinates. We see midpoints, 90-degree dial positions, and hard aspect contacts calculated programmatically, not estimated from published ephemerides. The Uranian planet positions use the orbital elements embedded in the Swiss ephemeris fictitious body tables. This is a retrospective symbolic analysis, not a causal or scientific study. Astrological configurations are interpreted as symbolic reflections of events, not as predictors or causes. The disasters examined involve real human suffering, and this analysis is offered in the spirit of scholarly inquiry into astrological methodology. So let's look at the midpoint technique. So a midpoint, or half sum, is the exact halfway point between 2 planets or points on the zodiac. If Saturn is at 14 degrees 45 Gemini, or 74.75 degrees, and Pluto is at 12 degrees 38 Sagittarius, or 252.64 degrees, their direct midpoint is at 163.69 degrees, being 13 degrees 42 Virgo. A third planet, or angle, landing on or near this midpoint with an orb is said to be triggered by it, combining the symbolism of all 3 factors into a single planetary picture. Midpoints are evaluated on the 90-degree dial, which folds a 360-degree circle into 4 90-degree segments. It groups all hard aspects from near conjunction, square, opposition, semi-square, sesquiquadrate into a single visual cluster, making it far easier to spot contacts. The dial was developed by the Hamburg School and popularized by Reinhold Eberton in a system of cosmobiology. Alrighty. So, right here we can clearly see how the 90-degree dial works. Saturn and Pluto, and they're 178 degrees apart on the 360 degrees wheel, and near exact opposition, cluster within 2 degrees on a 90 degrees dial. So here's our 360 degrees zodiac wheel and our 90 degrees dial clustered. We can also see here on the bottom that Saturn, which is at 14 degrees 45 Gem, and Pluto at 12 degrees 38 Sag are 177.89 degrees apart on the 360 degrees wheel, but only 2.11 degrees apart on the 90 degrees dial. is 74.75 degrees versus 72.64 degrees, revealing a near exact opposition. And right there. So let's talk about orb conventions. So for this analysis, the following orbs are used on the 90-degree dial. 1.0 degrees for midpoint contacts, planet or angle within 1 degrees of a midpoint, and 1.0 degrees for hard aspects between planets and TNPs. These are tighter than natal orbs, consistent with the cosmobiological convention that midpoint work demands precision. Abraham recommended orbs of 0.5 degrees through 1.5 degrees for midpoint contacts, with personal points Sun, Moon, Midheaven, Ascendant given slightly wider tolerance. And 8 Uranian planets. The Hamburg School introduced 8 hypothetical trans-Neptunian planets, abbreviated TNPs. These are not observed celestial bodies, but calculated points based on orbital elements proposed by White and Segrin. They represent archetypal principles not fully covered by the traditional planets. Each TNP moves slowly through the zodiac, 262 to 720-year orbits, giving them a generational and transpersonal quality. So we have our TNP, abbreviation, core keywords, as well as its orbital period. So Cupido or CU, its family groups are its togetherness, social bonds, the orbital period of 262 years. Hades, or HA, the unpleasant decay, garbage, the past, depth, toxicity, 360 years orbital period. Zeus, or ZE, controlled fire, machines, combustion, leadership, military, 455 years orbital period. Kronos, KR's authority, government's superiority, excellent standards, and its 521 years orbital period. Apollon, or AP, expansion, commerce, science, multiplication, the many, with a 576 years orbital period. And then we see Admetos, or AD, its endurance, standstill, blockage, raw materials, inertia, orbital period of 617 years. Vulcanus, or VU, mighty force, power, intensity, violent eruption, orbital period of 663 years. And Poseidon, or PO, being spirituality, enlightenment, truth, culture, and wisdom, and an orbital period of 720 years. So 8 Uranian trans-Neptunian planets, TNPs, core associations, orbital periods from White Segrin elements. Now we begin with the first case study here, September 11th attacks. The event for the first impact, American Airlines Flight 11 strikes the North Tower of the World Trade Center. The date time, of course, September 11, 2001 at 8:46 a.m. EDT, 12:46 UT, New York City with those exact coordinates. The significance here is 2,977 people were killed, triggered the global war on terror, Saturn-Pluto opposition exact 1 month prior. So this is the event chart with the key positions. We see our planetary body, as well as the position, 90 degrees dial, and the type. So key positions for the 9/11 first impact chart computed with the Swiss ephemeris. And we see here that Sun was at 18 degrees 50 Virgo. On the 90 degrees dial, it was at 78.85 degrees. The Moon was at 28 degrees 04 Gemini. On the 90 degrees dial, it was at 88.08 degrees. Saturn was at 14 degrees 45 Gemini. On the 90 degrees dial, it was at 74.75 degrees. And this position is for the 360 degrees wheel. Okay, let me know that these are the planets we're talking about right here. And then we're going to get into the angles and the TNPs. So Pluto was at 12 degrees 38 Sagittarius, 360 degrees, and 90 degree dial 72.64. Uranus 21 degrees 50 Aquarius, and on the 9 degrees dial 51.84 degrees. Mars at 1 degrees 26 Capricorn, on the 9 degrees dial 1.44 degrees. And now onto the angles, we see the ascendant was at 14 degrees 21 Libra, 14.35 degrees on the 90 degrees dial, and it's an angle, of course. The midheaven is at 16 degrees 41 Cancer, and on the 90 degrees dial it's 16.69 degrees. And now our TNPs, You see Hades was at 21 degrees 26 Gemini, 81.44 degrees on the 9 degrees dial. Kronos was at 0 degrees 02 Cancer, 0.04 on the 9 degrees dial. Zeus was at 5 degrees 31 Libra, 5.52 on the 9 degrees dial. And Vulcanus was at 21.51 degrees Cancer. 21 degrees 51 Cancer, being 21.85 degrees on the 9 degrees dial. So now we look at this midpoint analysis and we see Saturn-Pluto opposition was a defining configuration of 2001 exact on August 5th, just 5 weeks before the attacks. On the 90 degrees dial, Saturn at 74.75 degrees and Pluto at 72.64 degrees sit within 2.11 degrees of each other, revealing a near exact opposition. Their midpoint at 73.69 degrees falls very close to both bodies, concentrating the symbolism of structural collapse of Saturn through destructive transformation, Pluto. And the most striking midpoint hits in this chart, as we can see, the point, midpoint, orb, and interpretation, starting with Hades on the moon Saturn midpoint with an orb of 0.025 degrees, suffering Hades at the emotional structural midpoint. We see ARMC, Saturn Uranus midpoint, 0.197 degrees, sudden structural disruption on the public axis. The MC, the Uranus Pluto, with an orb of 0.547 degrees, sudden transformation at the midheaven, public image. Hades on the Mars Pluto, MP, orb of 0.600 degrees, destructive violence channel through decay, toxicity. In ARMC on Mars Neptune, 0.795 degrees, dissolved hidden aggression on the public axis. So these are the top midpoint hits for 9/11, with an orb being lesser than 1.0 degrees on the 90 degrees dial. Here is the Uranian planet overlay. So Hades is the unpleasant decay suffering, and it sits at 21 degrees 26 Gemini. It's conjunct the moon, which is at 28 degrees 04 Gemini, as well as Saturn, 14 degrees 45 Gemini, placing the TMP of decay squarely on the Saturn-Pluto axis. So that would be Hades equals moon Saturn at an orb of just 0.025 degrees. It's one of the tightest midpoint contacts in this entire study. Kronos, which is authority and government, at 0 degrees 02 Cancer, sits on the Cancer cardinal point, activating themes of governmental authority and national sovereignty. Vulcanus, mighty force at 21 degrees 51 Cancer, is conjunct the MC area, suggesting overwhelming force directed at the public standing of the nation. And now I want to show you guys this visual, 90 degrees dial 4, the 9/11 first impact, planets on the outer ring. We see Uranian TMPs on the inner ring. We can note that the Saturn-Pluto cluster near 73 degrees and the Hades-Moon-Saturn cluster near 81 through 88 degrees. And what this would I'm speaking all over the place. This chart alone shows so much violence. If you know astrology, you'll look at this and be like, whoa, yeah, it makes perfect sense. So here's a visual midpoint tree right down here. And it's showing the tightest midpoint contacts. The bar length is inversely proportional to orb, so longer equals tighter. And we can see that Hades equals moon Saturn, orb of 0.025 degrees, it's direct, and it's a tighter orb. And this is the tightest orb. ARMC equals Saturn Uranus, and then we see MC equals Uranus Pluto, Hades equals Mars Pluto, ARMC equals Mars Neptune, node equals Mars node, Mars equals Mars node, and ARMC equals Uranus Pluto. Our second case study is a Space Shuttle Challenger disaster. Breaks apart 73 seconds after launch, killing all 7 crew members. This occurred January 28, 1986, 11:38 a.m. EST, 16:38 UT, Cape Canaveral, FL. The significance is 7 astronauts were killed, orbiting failure in cold conditions in Saturn-Uranus conjunction era. So we see here our key positions for the Challenger launch chart. We have the planets, angles as well as TMPs. So right off the bat we see Sun was at 8 degrees 28 Aquarius, and on the 9 degrees dial it switches to 38.47 degrees. Moon was at 11 degrees 02 Virgo on the 9 degree dial, 71.04 degrees. Saturn from 7 degrees 42 Sag to 67.78 degrees on the 9 degree dial. Uranus at 20 degrees 58 Sag to 80.96 degrees on the 90 degrees dial. Pluto at 7 degrees 19 Scorpio to 37.32 degrees on the 90 degrees dial. And Mars at 27 degrees 17 Scorpio, 57.29 degrees on the 9 degrees dial. And with the ascendant, it's at 6 degrees 30 Taurus, and on the 9 degrees dial, 36.51 degrees. The midheaven at 24 degrees 37 Capricorn, on the 9 degrees dial, 24.62 degrees. Zeus was at 23 degrees 57 Virgo, 83.94 degrees on the 9 degrees dial. Volcanus at 12 degrees 25 Cancer, 12.41 degrees on the 90 degree dial. Admetos at 10 degrees 49 Taurus, 40.82 degrees on the 9 degrees dial, and Apollon at 12 degrees 33 Libra and 12.55 degrees on the 9 degrees dial. So, the Challenger disaster, it occurred during the Saturn-Uranus conjunction era, both in Sag, 13 degrees apart. We see Saturn 67.70 degrees dial and Uranus 80.96 degrees dial are within 13 degrees on the dial, reflecting their zodiacal conjunction. The critical midpoint hit is the MC equals Moon Saturn contact, and it's at 0.249 degrees orb. So the public mission, midheaven, carrying the emotional weight of structural failure, Moon Saturn. Pluto at 37.32 degrees dial sits within 0.82 degrees of the ascendant, 36.51 degrees, placing death and transformation on the horizon at the moment of launch. And now the Uranian planet overlay. We see that Apollon, which is expansion of many, is at 12.55 degrees dial, and is conjunct Canis, mighty force, at 12.41 degrees dial. An orb of just 0.133 degrees. This TMP conjunction suggests a massive visible force expanding outward. An apt description of the explosion that was broadcast live to millions. Admetos standstill blockage at 40.82 degrees dial is conjunct Venus, 40.63 degrees at 0.186 degrees orb, suggesting that something was frozen or blocked in the vehicle systems, a symbolic echo of the O-ring failure that occurred due to unusually cold launch conditions. Here is the visual here, the 90 degrees dial for the Challenger disaster. Note that the Apollon Volcanus conjunction near 12 degrees and Pluto ascendant cluster near 37 degrees. And here's the midpoint tree for the Challenger disaster. So MC equals Moon Saturn, and it's indirect, then orb of 0.249 degrees. MC equals Moon Saturn with the direct orb of 0.249 degrees. And Cupido equals Mars node, orb of 0.481 degrees, and it's direct. On to Chernobyl. Nuclear disaster. Reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant explodes during a safety test April 26, 1986, 1:23 a.m. MSK, 22:23 UT, Chernobyl, Ukraine. Worst nuclear disaster in history, INES level 7, Uranus C square, as well as Volcanus prominent. So again, we're going to look at our key positions for the Chernobyl explosion chart this time. Okay, so we see that Sun was at 5 degrees 24 Taurus, 360, and then 35.41 degrees on the 9 degrees dial. Moon 25 degrees 04 Scorpio, 55.06 degrees. Mars at 13 degrees 09 Capricorn, 13.16 degrees. Saturn at 8 degrees 36 Sag, 68.59 degrees. Uranus at 22 degrees 01 Sag, 82.02 degrees. Pluto at 5 degrees 59 Scorpio, 35.99 degrees. We see the ascendant at 6 degrees 18 Capricorn, 6.30 degrees. Midheaven at 11 degrees 55 Scorpio, 41.92 degrees. We see Zeus at 22 degrees 48 Virgo, 82.80 degrees. Volcanus 12 degrees 10 Cancer, 12.17 degrees. Hades at 4 degrees 13 Gemini, 64.22 degrees. And Admetos at 11 degrees 38 Taurus, 41.63 degrees. So, Chernobyl is the most TMP-rich chart in this study. We see the Sun at Pluto opposition. Sun's at 35.41 degrees dial. Pluto at 35.99 degrees dial. It's within 0.58 degrees, a near exact opposition of life force, the Sun, and nuclear transformation, Pluto. We also see Venus equals Uranus-Pluto midpoint hit at 0.058 degrees orb is extraordinarily tight, suggesting sudden violent transformation channeled through material values. Mars-Uranus midpoint at 2.59 degrees dial is conjunct the ascendant 6.30 degrees and Neptune 5.72 degrees, placing sudden explosive energy, Mars-Uranus, on the horizon and dissolving it into the environment, Neptune. Alright, Uranian planet overlay. So Zeus, which is controlled fire, machines, and combustion, at 82.80 degrees style is conjunct Uranus, sun energy, at 82.02 degrees style. An orb of just 0.78 degrees. The Zeus-Uranus conjunction directly symbolizes the nuclear reactor's controlled energy, which is Zeus, undergoing a sudden disruption, Uranus. We see Volcanus, mighty force, at 12.17 degrees dial, is conjunct Mars, destructive energy, at 13.16 degrees dial, with an orb of 0.98 degrees. So, in Mars, Volcanus contact represents overwhelming physical force, fitting for a reactor that literally turned into a nuclear cannon. Admetos, standstill blockage at 41.63 degrees dial, is conjunct the midheaven, 41.92 degrees, suggesting that the public standing of the facility was blocked or frozen, an echo of the Soviet cover-up that followed. Here's the visual, the 90